The wedding venue glimmered like a dream. Strings of golden fairy lights draped across marble pillars, violins playing faintly in the background, and laughter echoing through the air thick with perfume and champagne. I stood outside, my palms cold and trembling as I clutched the small white envelope that had arrived in my mailbox weeks ago. It wasn't an official invitation. No RSVP, no table number, not even my full name. Just Lucy, written in my mother's handwriting. I told myself it had to be a mistake, that surely my own family wouldn't exclude me from my brother's wedding. But deep down I already knew. I wasn't really wanted there. My brother Andrew was always the golden child, the one who never made mistakes, the one my parents bragged about to anyone who would listen. Our son, the successful architect, they'd say, beaming with pride. And me? I was just Lucy, the quiet one, the one who chose to write, to paint, to chase dreams that didn't pay bills or impress relatives. My family called it a hobby phase, even though I was 28 and had built a small following online for my art. To them, Andrew's marriage to Emma was the grand event of the decade, a union between two perfect lives. And I was a blemish they'd rather hide behind closed doors. Still, I wanted to be there. I wanted to see my brother take his vows, to smile at him and remember what it felt like to belong. I spent the entire night before trying to convince myself I wasn't making a mistake. I chose my best blue dress, modest but elegant, and curled my hair the way Mom used to like when I was a teenager. As I stood in front of the mirror that morning, I whispered, "You have every right to be there." My voice trembled, but I believed it enough to drive across town to the Grand Seraphine Hotel, where the wedding was being held. When I arrived, the valet gave me a confused look. "Are you with the wedding party?" he asked. "I'm family," I said with a shaky smile, handing him my keys. The words tasted strange on my tongue. Inside, the lobby was alive with chatter and shimmering gowns. I spotted my parents near the grand staircase, greeting guests like royalty. Mom looked radiant in her silver gown, her hair perfectly pinned, her smile sharp and practiced. When she saw me, her expression faltered for just a second. Her lips parted slightly, and then she composed herself with a tight smile. "Oh, you came?" she said, her tone delicate, like she was addressing a stranger who'd shown up at the wrong house. "Of course I came," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. "It's Andrew's big day." Her eyes darted toward the entrance of the hall, where guests were being escorted in. "Lucy, sweetheart," she said softly. "You should have called first. Things are a bit complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, frowning. "It's my brother's wedding, Mom. Why would it be complicated?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to my father, who was busy shaking hands with one of Emma's uncles. He didn't even look at me. No hello, no acknowledgement. Just silence. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "It's fine. I'll just find my seat." As I made my way toward the main doors, my heart pounded louder than the orchestra inside. I imagined Andrew's face lighting up when he saw me. Maybe he'd hug me. Maybe he'd tell me he was glad I came. Maybe, just maybe, things would finally feel normal again. But then, as I reached for the door handle, I heard my name. "Lucy?" I turned. Andrew stood there, tall and handsome in his black tuxedo, his tie perfectly knotted. His eyes widened when he saw me, but instead of joy, I saw discomfort flicker across his face. "Lucy, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low, his tone cautious. "I came to see you get married," I said, smiling nervously. "I mean, I'm your sister." "Of course I came." He shifted awkwardly, glancing over his shoulder toward the glowing hall behind him. "Listen," he said, stepping closer. "I'm really sorry, but you weren't invited." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. "What?" "You weren't invited," he repeated, avoiding my eyes now. Emma's family wanted a smaller guest list, and Mom thought what? I interrupted, my voice cracking, "that it would be better if you didn't come," he finished quietly. The words sliced through me. My heart dropped to my stomach as the laughter from the hall drifted past us, warm and mocking. "Better if I didn't come," I whispered. "Andrew, I'm your sister," He looked genuinely pained now. I know, but it's complicated, Lucy. There were reasons. What reasons? I demanded. Did I do something? Did I hurt you or Emma? He shook his head. No, it's not like that. It's just, Emma's parents are really particular about appearances. They wanted it. Refined, you know? Limited to close circles. I almost laughed at the irony. Close circles? I'm your only sister. Please, Lucy, he said, glancing around nervously as a few guests slowed to watch. Don't make this a scene. Just go home, okay? We'll talk later. The words echoed in my ears like a verdict. Don't make this a scene. Go home. Like I was some intruder, a trespasser at my own brother's joy. I felt my cheeks burn as I stepped back, my eyes blurring with tears. People were staring now, some whispering, some pretending not to. I nodded numbly. Of course. Wouldn't want to ruin your perfect day, Lucy. But I was already turning away. I walked as fast as I could through the lobby, through the sea of laughter and perfume, until I reached the cold evening air outside. My chest was tight and I could barely breathe. I didn't stop until I reached my car, where I collapsed into the driver's seat and finally let the tears fall. For nearly an hour, I sat there, watching through the windshield as more guests arrived. The music grew louder inside, joyful, careless. Somewhere in that golden-lit hall, my family toasted to love and unity while I sat in the parking lot like an unwanted ghost. I thought about leaving right then, driving far away, and never looking back. But something inside me, a quiet, simmering anger, refused to let go. I had been silent for years, always the one to forgive, to stay small, to keep peace in a family that never saw me as enough. But tonight, the silence broke. I wiped my tears, grabbed my phone, and scrolled through my photos. And then I saw it. The picture I had taken months ago at my parents' house. It was a letter, old and crumpled, tucked inside one of Andrew's drawers when I'd been searching for some paint supplies. A letter signed by Emma, dated years before she and my brother even started dating. The words were burned into my mind. I never meant to hurt her. What happened between us that night was a mistake, but I can't stop thinking about you. Her handwriting. Her guilt. And the her she mentioned? That was me. My hands trembled as I stared at the image again, the truth sinking in deeper. Emma wasn't just my brother's fiancée. She was also the woman who had been with my ex-boyfriend, Ethan, the one who'd ghosted me without explanation, only to reappear in my brother's life months later as his true love. I had kept that secret buried, convincing myself it didn't matter. That the past was the past. But sitting in that car, mascara streaked down my cheeks, I realized something. My brother had built his happiness on the ruins of my pain. And my parents had chosen to celebrate it while pretending I didn't exist. The betrayal wasn't just about the wedding. It was years of being unseen, uninvited, unacknowledged. Tonight was simply the final proof. As I looked back at the glowing hall one last time, I felt a strange calm wash over me. They wanted me to leave quietly, to fade away like I always did. Fine. I would leave, but not quietly. I started the car, the headlights illuminating the hotel gates ahead. In the reflection of my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of my tear-streaked face. Tired, broken, but no longer small. Somewhere deep inside a spark flickered. They wanted their picture-perfect life. Their perfect wedding. Their perfect lie. But they'd forgotten one thing. I knew the truth, and I wasn't afraid to use it. That night, as I drove away into the dark, I didn't feel like the uninvited sister anymore. I felt like someone reborn. Someone who'd been pushed too far and was finally ready to push back. The wedding would go on. The toasts would be made. The photos would capture smiles that hid deceit. But beneath all that glitter and gold, cracks had already begun to form. And by the time I was done, every single one of them would see what happens when you tell someone like me to go away, because I wasn't gone. Not yet. And this was just the beginning. When I got home that night, The silence in my apartment felt heavier than ever. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, everything sounded sharper, louder, like the world was holding its breath. I dropped my purse on the counter, kicked off my heels, and sank into the couch. The tears had stopped hours ago, but the ache inside me hadn't faded. My brother's words echoed in my mind, "You weren't invited." That sentence had split something inside me that couldn't be glued back together. But beneath the heartbreak, something darker simmered. Not rage, not quite yet, but a slow, burning sense of injustice. I had always been the one to stay quiet, to forgive, to move on. But this time, silence felt like surrender, and I was done surrendering. I couldn't sleep. The night dragged on, my mind replaying every moment of the day in painful clarity. My mother's false smile, my father's indifference, my brother's guilt. The way everyone pretended that excluding me was somehow justified. I tossed and turned until around 3 a.m. I got up and began pacing the apartment. My eyes landed on my laptop sitting on the dining table. Something in me told me to open it, to dig deeper into the past that I'd spent so long trying to bury. I hesitated at first, but then I remembered the letter, the one I'd found months ago, the one that had haunted me since. It was still saved in my digital files. I walked over, flipped open my laptop, and searched for the scan. Within seconds, the image appeared on the screen, and the familiar cursive handwriting filled my vision. I never meant for it to happen. What we did that night was wrong, and I can't stop thinking about her, about what it did to her. You said we'd keep it between us, but I feel guilty every day. I hope someday she forgives us, even if she never finds out. Signed, Emma. I stared at the letter until my vision blurred. Every line was a knife twisting in my chest. I remembered the day I found it clearly. It had been a quiet afternoon at my parents' house. I had stopped by to drop off some old sketchbooks when my mother asked me to grab something from Andrew's old room. The room was half empty back then. A shrine to his achievements, trophies lined up neatly on the shelf, certificates framed on the wall. I was looking for a box of photo albums when I noticed a smaller box tucked beneath his desk. Curiosity got the better of me. Inside were random keepsakes, an old watch, a ticket stub, and then that letter, folded neatly in a faded envelope. The name Andrew was written on it in delicate script. When I read it, my world cracked. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. What we did that night, she? Who was she referring to? And then, as I reread it, the pieces fit together like shards of broken glass. Emma, my brother's future wife, had been apologizing for betraying me. Because she was me. The letter mentioned things only I would understand. My breakup with Ethan, the timeline that had never made sense. Ethan had vanished from my life without a word, and weeks later, Andrew had started dating Emma. I'd tried to believe it was a coincidence. I told myself I was being paranoid. But that letter was the proof I never wanted. Back then, I didn't confront anyone. I told myself it wasn't worth it. I deleted Ethan's number, avoided family dinners, and buried my hurt under a calm smile. But now, after being humiliated at their wedding, told to go away like I was nothing, that buried pain clawed its way back to the surface. As I stared at the scanned letter, a thought took root in my mind, quiet but relentless. They think I'm weak because I stayed silent. I opened a blank document. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. I wasn't sure what I was doing yet. Revenge wasn't my first instinct. I wasn't cruel by nature. But something inside me had changed that night. I couldn't keep carrying their secret while they lived happily ever after, pretending the past never existed. I began typing. Sometimes the people who smile the brightest at their weddings are the ones who stepped over others to get there. But karma never forgets. I read it again, adjusted a few words, and added the image of the letter below it. My heart pounded as I stared at the post. It wasn't just anger driving me. It was truth. They'd taken so much from me. My relationship, my dignity, my place in the family. All I had left was my voice. And for once, I was going to use it. Still, I hesitated before hitting publish. What would happen after? Would people believe it? Would they blame me for airing family business? I thought about how Andrew had looked at me earlier, not with love, but with embarrassment. How my mother had smiled like I was an inconvenience. They'd already erased me. What more could I lose? So I set the post to go live in 24 hours. A timed release. If I changed my mind, I could delete it. But if not, the truth would finally see the light. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker and fade as dawn crept in. For the first time in years, I felt oddly calm. Not happy, not vindicated, but still. Like I had finally taken back something they'd stolen from me. Control. The next morning, my phone buzzed endlessly. I blinked against the sunlight pouring through the curtains and reached for it. The notification bar was flooded. At first, I thought something had gone wrong. But then I remembered. The post had gone live. Hundreds of people had seen it within hours. My small art page had never seen that kind of attention before. Comments poured in, some sympathetic, others stunned. This can't be real. Wait, isn't this about that wedding last night? That's Andrew and Emma, isn't it? The internet was already connecting the dots faster than I'd expected. By noon, their names were trending in our local community forum. Screenshots of the letter were everywhere, with people debating its authenticity. Some defended Emma, others accused her of manipulation. And among it all, I sat in silence, watching the storm I'd unleashed. By afternoon, my phone rang nonstop. Unknown numbers, messages from mutual friends, and then one message that made my stomach drop. "How could you do this to us, Lucy?" It was from Emma. I stared at her name on the screen, my pulse quickening. My fingers shook as I typed back, "You did this to yourself. I just stopped keeping your secrets." There was no reply, just silence. But within the hour, my mother called. Her voice was sharp and cold. "What have you done, Lucy? Do you have any idea what kind of damage this is causing?" "Andrew is furious." "Good," I said quietly. "Now he knows how it feels." "Stop being childish," she snapped. "You've embarrassed the whole family. You think people will pity you? They'll just see you as jealous." I let out a bitter laugh. "I was jealous, Mom. Jealous of the way you looked at him like he could do no wrong. Jealous that you pretended not to see what Emma did. Jealous that you all made me believe I was nothing." Her voice trembled for a second, but she recovered quickly. "You should take the post down." "I won't," I said. "Because the truth doesn't disappear just because you ignore it." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but I didn't regret it. Not for a second. By evening, the situation had spiraled beyond control. Emma's family issued some vague statement about privacy. Andrew's colleagues had started whispering at his firm. Ethan's name surfaced too. Someone had found his old photos with Emma online. Every thread led back to that one post. That one truth they'd tried to bury. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, reading through the chaos. A strange feeling washed over me. Part sorrow, part satisfaction. I hadn't planned to destroy their lives, not really. But maybe this was what accountability looked like. Maybe this was justice in its rawest form. As night fell again, another message arrived. This time from an unknown number. "You think this makes you better than us? You'll regret it." I didn't reply. I didn't have to, because for the first time in my life, they were the ones scrambling, explaining, hiding, not me. The letter had once been a secret that suffocated me. Now it was their burden to bear. I closed my laptop and leaned back, exhaling deeply. The truth was out. The masks had cracked. And though I didn't know what would come next, one thing was certain. The days of being the quiet, forgotten sister were over. They wanted me invisible. But now the whole world saw me. The week after the post went viral felt like living in a dream. Not a pleasant one, but the kind where everything you ever feared suddenly stands in front of you, too real to ignore. I hadn't left my apartment in days. Every time I checked my phone, there were new messages, new comments, new whispers online. The story had spread beyond our small circle, reaching people who didn't even know our family. Strangers debated my pain like it was entertainment. Some called me brave, others called me bitter. But the ones that hurt most were from people I loved, or thought I did. My parents' friends called me dramatic. My aunt texted me, "You should have handled this privately." Even my old classmates chimed in, gossiping about how Lucy always had a flair for attention. They didn't know what it was like to stand at your brother's wedding and be told to go away. They didn't know how silence can kill you slowly, until speaking up feels like the only way to breathe again. The first time I heard from my parents after that, it was through a voicemail. My mother's voice was clipped and cold. "Lucy, your father and I are deeply disappointed. You've humiliated your family. Take down that post before it ruins what's left of your brother's reputation." I didn't call her back. I didn't have the energy to fight anymore. I knew where I stood with them, not as a daughter, but as a problem they wanted to fix. They had always protected Andrew, even when he was wrong. When he got into trouble in college, I was the one they blamed for distracting him. When Emma came into the picture, I was the one they quietly erased. Now, even after everything, they were still choosing him over me. By midweek, the fallout began in full force. Emma's family issued a vague public statement, pretending it was all a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. The letter was undeniable proof, and the internet never forgets. Emma deleted all her social media accounts, and people started posting screenshots of her old photos with captions like, "The fairy tale that wasn't." I didn't expect it to go that far, but it did. By Thursday, I received a text from one of Andrew's old friends. He's been suspended from work. Apparently, his firm doesn't want the publicity. I sat there staring at the message for a long time. I wasn't happy, not exactly, but I wasn't sorry either. That night, around 10 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I froze, heart pounding. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I peered through the peephole, I saw him, Andrew. He looked nothing like the man I'd seen at the wedding. His tuxedo had been replaced with a wrinkled hoodie and jeans, his hair unkempt, eyes heavy with exhaustion. For a long moment, I considered not answering. But then I opened the door. He stood there awkwardly, holding a small paper bag. "I brought you something," he said quietly. "Your favorite, chocolate croissants. From that cafe near Dad's office. I didn't move. Why are you here?" He sighed, looking down. "Because I needed to see you. I don't even know where to start." "Try I'm sorry," I said flatly. He winced. "I am sorry, Lucy, for all of it. For that night, for the way I treated you, for letting Mom and Dad make me believe it was okay." I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "You told me to go away, Andrew. At your wedding, in front of everyone." "I know," he said softly, "and I hate myself for it." He ran a hand through his hair, his voice cracking. "You have to believe me. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just panicked. Emma said it would cause drama if you showed up, and Mom said—" "Of course," Mom said. I interrupted bitterly. "She always says. And you always listen." He looked up at me then, eyes red. I thought keeping the peace was the right thing. I thought if I just went along, everyone would be happy. But now I've lost everything. I stayed silent, watching him struggle with the weight of his own words. For the first time, he looked small. Not the perfect son, not the golden child, just a man who had finally seen the consequences of his choices. "Emma left," he said suddenly. His voice was hollow. "She packed up and went to her parents. They cut us off financially. Her dad called me this morning, told me I was a disgrace. I didn't feel pity, but I did feel something close to sadness. 'I'm sorry she hurt you,' I said quietly. 'But she hurt me first.' 'You both did.' He nodded, his expression broken. 'I know. I wish I could undo it.' 'You can't,' I said. 'But maybe you can stop pretending it didn't happen.' He nodded again, his shoulders slumping. I guess that's fair. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't the angry kind anymore. It was heavy, but healing in its own strange way. Finally, I took the paper bag from his hand. The croissants inside were still warm. "I used to think you hated me," I said softly. He shook his head quickly. "Never. I just didn't know how to stand up for you without disappointing everyone else. That's the thing about our family, I said with a sad smile. They confuse silence with loyalty. He met my eyes then, tears glistening. Do you hate me, Lucy? I thought about it for a moment before shaking my head. No, I hate what you did. But not you. You're still my brother, even if you forgot I was your sister for a while. He let out a shaky breath, his relief visible. Thank you, he whispered. I'm not forgiving you yet, I said. That takes time. I understand. He turned toward the door, hesitated, then added quietly, I don't expect you to come back to the family anytime soon. But if you ever decide to, I'll make sure they listen this time. I didn't answer. I just watched him leave. When the door closed behind him, I felt lighter, not happy, but free. Over the next few days, the chaos slowly died down. The online storm passed, replaced by new scandals and distractions. My posts stopped trending, though the truth still lingered in the corners of the internet. People moved on, as they always do. But my family didn't. The cracks I'd opened couldn't be sealed anymore. Emma's engagement photos disappeared from social media. My parents stopped attending their usual social gatherings for a while, too embarrassed to face questions. For the first time, their perfect image had shattered. And maybe that was what it took for them to finally see me. One Sunday afternoon, my mother showed up unannounced. I opened the door and almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, and her confidence dimmed. She held a small photo album in her hands. Can I come in? She asked softly. I hesitated, then nodded. She sat on the couch, placing the album on the table between us. Your father didn't want me to come, she admitted. He still thinks you were wrong to post that letter. I know, I said quietly. But I've been thinking, she continued. Maybe we were wrong too. Maybe we pushed you away when you needed us most. I looked at her, unsure if I should believe her. Her eyes were wet, her voice trembling. You made me feel invisible, Mom, like I didn't matter. She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know, and I'm so sorry. You were always so different from Andrew. So emotional, so creative. I didn't understand you, and instead of trying, I made you feel small. Hearing her say those words broke something in me. For years, I had dreamed of that moment, of her acknowledging what she'd done. But now that it was happening, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt peaceful, like closing a wound that had been open for too long. She slid the photo album toward me. These are from when you and Andrew were kids, before everything got so complicated. I opened it and smiled weakly at the photos. 2 laughing children covered in mud, our arms around each other, our mother smiling behind the camera. For the first time, I didn't feel resentment, just nostalgia for a version of us that hadn't yet learned how to hurt each other. When she left that evening, I stood by the window, watching the sunlight fade into gold. The city hummed softly below, alive and indifferent. I thought about everything that had happened. The humiliation, the exposure, the loss, the truth. It hadn't brought me joy, but it had brought me clarity. Some people wait their whole lives for an invitation, to a wedding, to a family, to belonging. But that night I realized I didn't need one anymore. I didn't need my brother's approval or my parents' validation to know my worth. I had found something much more powerful. Peace. I brewed myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the sky darken. Somewhere out there, my family was piecing together their new reality, and I was finally building mine. I wasn't the uninvited sister anymore. I was the woman who had finally invited herself back into her own life, and this time no one could tell me to go away.